Good morning. I'm Dr. David Pedler, the Scientific Director of the Canadian Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research, also known as CIMVHR. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui pour ce symposium. Thank you for logging into today's symposium on military and veteran family research, setting the stage for the next chapter. Before we begin, let's acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we're meeting virtually, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Today's symposium wouldn't have been possible without the dedication of CIMVHR's Military and Veteran Families Research Advisor, Dr. Heidi Cram, who has worked with many of the presenters and panelists today to develop this symposium. Thank you very much, Heidi. I would now like to invite CIMVHR Associate Scientific Director, Dr. Stephanie Belanger, to say a few words. Thank you, Stephanie.
Merci, Dave. C'est toujours un plaisir pour nous de mettre au premier plan les proches du personnel militaire et des vétérans. Nous sommes bien fiers du symposium d'aujourd'hui. Experts in the field will share how far family research has come over the last 10 years. They will present recent advances in family research, and they will discuss pathways forward for enhancing research for the decade ahead. J'attends avec impatience d'en apprendre plus et d'écouter les présentations d'aujourd'hui. It is now my great pleasure to invite Dr. Heidi Cram, my longtime colleague, CIMVHR Research Advisor on Military and Veteran Families, and Associate Professor in the School of Rehabilitation Therapy at Queen's University, to start the symposium. Heidi.
Dave and Stephanie, thank you so much for the kind words and introduction. It is my privilege to welcome you all to today's symposium. Over the past 10 years, military and veteran family health research in Canada has been marked by collective vision and action across academics, government scientists, policymakers, service providers, research trainees, philanthropic organizations, and family members themselves. Through CIMVHR, we've seen an ongoing increase in the output and impact of the research, with a significant growth in the relationships that remain so fundamental to the success of our collective endeavors. Today, we are excited to reflect through the work of a dedicated group of trainees on the group of the field, and to have CIMVHR Fellow Dr. Deborah Norris reflect on this growth further. We will hear what we now know about the contemporary Canadian military family through the scientific leadership of Linda Manser. We will also welcome our esteemed colleague, Professor Nicola Fear, who will inspire us with her international work. After the presentations and a short break, we will move to a series of panels where Nora Spink, CEO of the Vanier Institute of the Family and longtime collaborator of CIMVHR, will be moderating and facilitating questions and answers. Please feel free to participate in the English or French chats. I, along with Stephanie Belanger and Russ Mann, will do our best to answer your questions in the chat. Nora, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here to this very important symposium. It's my objective as moderator to create an environment for all of us to learn, for all of us to hear. The first thing that we are going to experience together is a short video that was put together by a group of trainees who are going to give us an overview of what their experience has been and their perspective on the history of military family research over the years. Run the video.
Putting down roots. The evolving nature of family research through the Canadian Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research. Not that long ago, military family researchers in Canada were few and far between. Important work was being done, but in isolated areas. It needed the space and support to flourish on its own. It was only a matter of time. Supported by CIMVHR, established in 2010, and the joint DND-CF report on the home front in 2013 that demonstrated a policy commitment to military families, this field has matured and expanded in key ways. Conceptually, methodologically, in the scope of the work, and through the connectivity of interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral networks of researchers and their trainees, government scientists, family advocates, service providers, and policymakers. In 2015, CIMVHR launched the Journal of Military, Veteran, and Health Research, creating a fertile ground for the field to grow. One of the first articles published in the journal was Making Military Families in Canada a Research Priority. It offered a lay of the land. At that time, military family research in Canada had typically taken a problem or risk focus, utilized non-Canadian data to explain the CAF family experience, applied narrow or outdated concepts of family, provided socio-demographic information, but rarely evaluations of family programs or policies, and relied heavily on the voices and data of service members and sometimes their spouses, but not often other family members. Since then, the number of family-based articles and abstracts published through CIMVHR has increased exponentially, now making up 24% of total publications. In 2015, only 3 articles were published, but 5 years later, there were 17. Also, while the journal has been the home in which many Canadian family researchers have published, family researchers from around the globe have also contributed. The climate has continued to warm to prioritizing military family needs, as shown through the 3 action items recognizing families within Strong, Secure, and Engaged, Canada's 2017 defense policy, along with the development of the Comprehensive Military Family Plan by CIMVHR in 2018. Key reports, such as those published by Linda Manser, have also helped us to understand who the nearly 100,000 family members connected to the 68,000 regular force members are. We now know that the makeup of these families is changing, even if the definitions are not. But spouses are more educated than ever before. And some even follow their partners into the military, further reinforcing that the strength of family should be considered not behind the uniform, but beside it. In early 2021, the release of the OVO report also turned over a new leaf, suggesting that families have mental health needs in their own right related to military service that should be considered and provided for, independent of the Veterans Treatment Plan. As the field has evolved, research within the CIMVHR ecosystem has offered an increasingly nuanced picture of military and veteran families. There is now a wider diversity in the family members being included in research studies, as well as the areas, such as work-family conflict, being published in the journal and presented at forum. Trainees are integral to building capacity in the field. Already, trainee work in our lab has moved beyond the scope of lifestyle factors of absence, risk, and relocation, as well as military to civilian transition, to also consider other areas of family functioning, such as sport and leisure, disability, caregiving, education, COVID impacts, suicide and mental health policy and programming, recruitment and experiences of family members entering into service, as well as linkages to other occupational groups, such as public safety personnel. As Canadian family researchers continue to branch out, the work of this growing legion has begun to take seed and bear fruit. We are setting the stage for the next chapter, which through solid training and collaboration can and should include a diversity of family voices, apply a wider range of family and social science theory and program evaluation to this unique and needed population, linking the changing roles, values, and motivations of military families to strategic issues such as recruitment, retention, and belonging.
Thank you to the trainees for that wonderful video. That evolution described how things have grown over a very short period of time. We were expecting about 15 to 20 people at the very first workshop at a CIMVHR event, and we ended up with over 50 people. Today, we have more than 300 who are joining us today. Many of those contributors to the growth of this knowledge and to our understanding of military and veteran families are here with us today. One of those leaders is Deborah Norris. Dr. Norris is part of the Department of Family Studies and Gerontology at Mount St. Vincent in Halifax. She has a background in family studies, critical theory, quantitative measures, and has done a number of studies and teaches in the areas of family relations, family violence, and research methods. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Deb Norris to give our opening presentation on the history of military veteran family research across Canada. Deb, welcome.
Thank you, Nora. And thank you to CIMVHR and the organizers of this symposium for the invitation to share reflections on the growth of military and veteran family research over the past 20 years. Next slide, please. A recent scoping review undertaken by myself and colleagues a few years ago provided a few flashbacks to the past, where military and veteran family research could be described using the adjectives on this slide. First of all, the research is linear. The research traced a straight line between the military institution and outcomes for families, where life course stages were conceptualized as discrete and mutually exclusive, not as a series of overlapping and intersecting processes. Secondly, the research was unidirectional. The emphasis was on the impacts of the military on families, not the reciprocal relationships between the two. Third, the research was risk and problem focused. Military and veteran families were seen as needy, vulnerable, and dependent, buffeted by the institutional imperatives of the military. And fourth, the unit of analysis within this research focused on the traditional family, where conceptualization of family mirrored a post-World War II definition that was nuclear, involving two-parent heterosexual families by way of structure, and where family functions were organized by gender. Last but not least, this research was not Canadian. There were few Canadian studies. Next slide, please. These depictions of military and veteran family research vary from my experience as a novice academic and practitioner who bravely knocked on the door of the very first Military and Veteran Family Resource Center in Canada, way back when, with a couple of brand new degrees in family studies under my arm, and where I was invited in to support the new staff in developing and implementing some military parenting programs, as well as military partnering programs. The family members who attended these early programs did not mirror the military and veteran family experience that was depicted in the literature. In fact, these families were resilient, resourceful, and they were problem solvers, imbued with agency and capacity. Their relationship with the military was not dependent, but interdependent. My curiosity about this variance between what I was seeing in my programs and what the literature was telling me kickstarted an interest and curiosity that also incited a military and veteran family research career. Next slide, please. So for about the next 15 years, I had the good fortune to work with DND colleagues who allowed this City Street researcher very graciously allowed this city street researcher to work with them to explore some of the priorities facing the military of the time. For example, there was interest in the impacts of the reduction in base housing ongoing at that particular time. Also, there was interest in understanding what it would mean for the military, given that there was an increase in numbers of military partners working in paid employment. There was also a worry about the impact of intensified operational tempo, often in hotspots around the globe, ongoing at that time. Correspondingly, the research that I was involved in, often with these colleagues at D&D, focused on female serving members who were parents, also caregiving, health and work, and the cycle of deployment. While ever grateful for these research opportunities and the connections that were made, some of which I still benefit from, the projects were sporadic and contingent. The program of research was not systematic until, next slide, the development of CIMVHR. CIMVHR can be described, in other words, the Canadian Institute for Military and Veteran Health Research, can be described as a game changer, not just for me and my research program, but for so many others. It has broken down silos between government and particularly for myself as a civilian military and veteran family researcher. It's created networks across disciplines and sectors, which has been instrumental in catalyzing military and veteran family research. Next slide, please. So what do we know now about military and veteran families that we didn't know back in the wilderness, so to speak? Next slide. Well, to begin with, we now have a greater appreciation for family diversity. The unit of analysis, in other words, family, is no longer a monolithic construct within military and veteran family research in Canada. The complexity, diversity of family life is now acknowledged, and research is built upon that awareness. Next slide, please. Okay. Assumptions about the relationship between military experience and military and veteran families is now bidirectional, not unidirectional as it was in the past. This acknowledgement of reciprocity has brought into view an understanding of a particular phenomenon, and that is that the work of military and veteran families can be articulated to the work of the military institution. That without the contributions of military and veteran families, the military could not achieve its mission. And correspondingly, without support from the military, the family health and well-being would also be affected. Next slide, please. There is also increasing recognition in the military and veteran family literature today that resilience characterizes military and veteran family experience, and that it is both a process and an outcome. Moreover, we now understand that military and veteran family resilience is not only a trait or an ability which you either have or you don't have, in other words, a binary definition of resilience, but rather it develops through interaction between the personal and interpersonal abilities of military and veteran families, as well as the social factors embodied within their lives. Which leads to the fourth and final attribute of contemporary military and veteran family research. Next slide, please. And that is that context matters. Recognition of this has facilitated growth in theory development, which serves as an effective foundation for ongoing military and veteran family research. For example, this ecological model, where military and veteran families are situated conceptually within a broader spheres of influence within their communities, with respect to programs and policies, as well as within the broad military institution overall. This modeling is embodied within military and veteran family research ongoing at present. Next slide. So thank you for the opportunity to take you on a quick trip from the wilderness to where we are today, which is positioned at a place where we can learn from lessons of the past, consolidate what we know, and also develop understandings of where we need to go from here. So I look forward to working with all of you in this symposium on understanding not just where we are now, where we've come from, but also our next steps. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Norris, for taking us through that history. As you can see from both the trainee video and Dr. Norris's presentation, you're getting a sense of the complexity and importance of military veteran family research over the past 5 to 10 years. Next, we have another Canadian leader whose work has been seminal in expanding our understanding of military veteran families. It's my pleasure to introduce Linda Manser. She's the Associate Director of Research and Strategic Program Development for Military Family Services at the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services. She's conducted research on the needs of military families and models of family resilience to inform the development of the comprehensive military family plan. She's done assessments on community needs, mental health, child and youth services, and supports special populations and program and service evaluation. It's my pleasure to welcome Linda to speak with us next. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Good morning. My name is Linda Manser, and I'm the Associate Director of Family Research and Strategic Program Development within the Military Family Services Division of Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Services. Picking up from Dr. Norris's presentation on the growth of research over the past 20 years, I will turn us now to discuss what we currently know about the contemporary Canadian military family. In 2018, CFMWS was tasked with conducting research to inform the development of a comprehensive military family plan as part of Canada's national defence policy. To determine how best to support military families, it was essential for us to understand who Canadian military families are and what challenges they are facing. We explored various evidence-based theoretical models on families. We conducted and commissioned 12 research studies and reviewed over 100 Canadian research reports to identify needs. We mapped and analyzed over 200 CAF services. We engaged stakeholders to validate our findings and analyze options to develop the realistic and effective solutions. And through this, we made recommendations so that families would be aware of and able to advocate for services that are available and aligned with where, when, and how they need them. This is a short summary of what we found. Historically, family has been defined as the military member, usually male, the civilian spouse, usually female, and their children. But the demographics of families in Canada are changing, as are CAF personnel. So our research and our services need to reflect these different family identities. So how many military families are there in Canada? To start, I must be clear that these demographics are as of August 2017, just a moment in time, and know that demographics change daily. Each day new recruits join, members leave the military, they get married, they get divorced, they have a baby, they move. So these numbers are only also just for Reg Force members who are posted in Canada in August 2017. They do not include Reg Force who are posted outside of Canada, and they do not include Reserve Force. With that said, in August 2017, there were 63,270 Reg Force members posted in Canada, with 34,910 spouses and 57,640 children. Where do they live? Almost 40% of all Reg Force posted in Canada live in Ontario. And while in the past most families lived in military housing, many of these have now closed, and families mostly live in the civilian community. That said, more than 80% of all Reg Force personnel and their families still live on or within a 30-minute drive away from the base they are posted to. Again. What do these families look like? Overall, 56% of Reg Force posted in Canada are married or common law, while 44% are single and or separated or divorced. Almost half of all Reg Force posted in Canada have children, and of those Reg Force with children, 14% are single parents. More than half of all Reg Force are under the age of 35 or have served less than 10 years, and almost half of all spouses are under the age of 35. There's also an even split among children under the age of 5, primary school age children, and adolescents. We also looked more closely at the gender of reg force posted in Canada, and what we found was that female reg force personnel, while representing only 15% of the total reg force, have proportionally greater caregiving responsibilities than male reg force. Of those reg force with children, 15% are female and 85% are male, which is the same as the overall gender ratio. But of all reg force who are single parents, 24% are female and 76% are male, which is higher than the 15 to 85 ratio. Similarly, of all reg force caring for a declared disabled child, 28% are female and 72% are male, again, higher than the general 15 to 85% ratio. The marital status of reg force with children is also very different when broken down by gender. Among male reg force personnel who have children, 11% are single, 80% are married to a civilian, and 9% are part of a dual service couple. But for female reg force personnel who have children, 18% are single parents, 29% are married to a civilian, and 53% are part of a dual service couple. What this suggests is that female reg force not only have greater caregiving responsibilities while they are serving, but they are also more likely to be completely immersed in the military culture, which could make their release transition more difficult. To better understand the experiences of military families, we created a simple journey map. There's the military journey, from recruitment through trainings, through postings and deployments, possibly through injury, and finally through to release. Families must adapt to the challenges that arise from these military requirements and transitions. And then there's the family journey. That journey starts with one's childhood and moving out as a single adult, possibly through marriage and having children, possibly through divorce and starting a blended family, through to retirement and death. Each of these major life events require adjustments, alter individuals, and change the family. Sometimes these cause hardship, and sometimes these create family resilience and growth. Research shows that military families commonly face 3 military journey and 3 family journey challenges. The 3 most significant military journey challenges are geographical relocations due to military career postings, absences from family due to operational requirements, and operational related illness, injury, or death. The 3 most common family journey challenges that can both compound and be compounded by the military challenges include personal well-being and mental health, financial stress, and intimate partner relationships. That said, the vast majority, or 80% of military families are managing these challenges successfully and feel they are resilient. Only 10% feel they are struggling. But there are still many unknowns, especially with respect to different family compositions and personas. I'll explore what we found in the research for each of the 3 military journey challenges a little more in depth. The first military challenge is relocations. Almost 1 in 4 reg force receive a posting each year requiring a relocation to a new base, and 1 in 5 overall are interprovincial. This translates to approximately 10,000 families moving every year, of which 8,000 of these are moving to a new province. Posting relocations are highly diverse among reg force, depending on rank, environment, occupation, etc. So it is virtually impossible to say how often families must relocate during the career. So those are the numbers, but what about the impacts caused by relocating? We know that about 1 in 5 spouses and children do not have a family doctor. 3 in 10 spouses feel they are underemployed, and 6 to 18% of families have additional requirements that make relocations more challenging. We know that for 50% of families who move, their financial situation is worsened after the relocation, primarily due to lost wages of the civilian spouse and to the increased cost of living. Only 25% of family members said that their financial situation improved, and 25% remain the same after a relocation. Of all family members, it's adolescents who struggle the most because of relocations, both academically and socially. Academically, due to disruptions caused by different educational curricula, and socially, as this age group's social support network shifts away from the family towards peers Disruptions in these peer groups can cause more challenges. The second military journey challenge is operationally required absences from the family. Like relocations, deployments and absences are also highly diverse among Reg Force, depending on rank, environment, occupation, missions, etc. So again, it's virtually impossible to say how many deployments and absences families must deal with throughout the career. But as a snapshot in time, about 2/3 of families at any time had experienced an operational absence within the past 1 to 3 years, while 1/3 had not. Unlike relocations, where adolescents are most negatively impacted, with absences, it's the younger children who are more negatively impacted. Their stage of development requires a strong parent-child attachment, which can be disrupted with lengthy or repeated separations. It should be noted that much of the research, though, has been on overseas deployments. Very little is known still on the many other types of absences, such as imposed restrictions, frequent interval separations, or short-term absences for things like training, search and rescue, and disaster relief missions. The third military journey challenge is operational illness, injury, or death. While only a small percentage are affected, the impact is substantial. From 2008 to 2018, an average of 1,500 Reg Force members were medically released each year, affecting an estimated 800 spouses and 1,350 children. It is important to note, though, that these numbers spiked quite drastically around 2014. Before that, there were about 1,000 medical releases a year, but after that, these numbers doubled. By 2017, the numbers began to decline again. So while we have numbers, it's difficult to generalize beyond just a moment in time. Of the medical releases, approximately 60% are releasing due to psychological limitations and 40% due to physical limitations. Overall, the majority transition without any difficulties, but 25% do experience difficulties. Most research to date has focused on how the spouse is able to care for the member rather than how they are impacted themselves by the injury. But we are starting to see some emerging themes. We are seeing that the medical release experience has a negative impact on interpersonal relationships. We are seeing poorer health and well-being among spouses linked to the well-being of the medically releasing personnel, partly because of distress caused by lack of information and support, and partly by the heightened caregiver burden. And we are seeing the critical role of communication to their relationship. So, with all this information on who families are and what challenges they are facing, what about all the services and supports that are available? We mapped and analyzed over 200 different services and programs offered through the CAF for Reg Force families posted in Canada, and we included several studies where their use of service was also explored. So what did we find? In general terms, 4 main themes. Depending on the service, only 25% up to 70% of families were aware they existed. The usage of services is low. Of those who'd used MFRC services in particular, the majority were satisfied and believed they received the assistance they needed. But 20% of spouses needed services that were not available, and many felt that the existing services were not relevant to their lifestyle. The majority want the same quality of support and service across the country and more convenient delivery of these services. So with all this knowledge gained through the recent research, what don't we know yet? Turns out a lot. What are the experiences for different identities? The research is focused on Reg Force posted in Canada, but what about those posted out CAN? What about Reserve Force? How are these impacts experienced differently by each of the environments? What is this like for single parents, or those with special needs, or dual serving couples, or same-sex couples? What are the comparisons to the general population? Outside of the military context, are these family challenges really much different than civilians? Why are some struggling while others are not? Are the families who are struggling accessing the support services, or are they struggling because they are not accessing the support services? Are 10% of the families using 90% of the services? And is that the right balance? Are evidence-based supports and interventions from civilian populations applicable to military and veteran families or from other countries? Can we transfer our knowledge that way? Then where does this leave us in terms of what to do next? Honestly, it leaves us with more questions to answer, but in my mind, 3 jump to the top. With COVID this past year, we've seen how fast the world changes for families. So how long will this research be current enough to still inform us? We know, for example, that during long absences, families used to suffer from lack of contact. But since the time this research was done, the information age has changed us all. Families are now in virtual contact almost constantly, even while we're apart. And COVID has only enhanced this capacity. So does this mean that the attachment struggles are no longer an issue? And what about postings? We know that the CAF now has alternative career paths and compassionate postings. So has this changed the landscape already? How recent does research need to be to still be relevant and informative? And how quick does it need to be done now? Rapid research is not common, but is this all we can afford now, given the pace of change? What is the balance between evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence? While we know the issues better now, has this translated to practice yet? And is the practice translating to research? Are we taking the time to truly understand the impact of our service for families to know if that's the reason that 80% are doing well, or if the 10% who are really struggling are doing so because they aren't using these services? And finally, how do we resource our collective research readiness? Do we have the capacity and the infrastructure to learn from each other? Are researchers, practitioners, and families all connected in a way that allow us to adapt quickly? Are we sharing with and learning from our international neighbors so that we can quickly mobilize knowledge? Which leads us to our next presentation from our colleague, Dr. Nicola Fear from the UK, who will speak more about what is happening internationally and where we need to look to the future, especially in light of cross-cutting global experiences like COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Your expansive knowledge and the work that you've been doing is amazing and continues to contribute to our understanding of military and veteran families. Linda's comments also lead us directly into the theme of diversity and complexity of families. And we're going to continue that theme with Nicola Fear. Dr. Fear is an epidemiologist at the academic department of the military mental health, and she's also the co-director of the King's College Center for Military Health Research. She started her work as an epidemiologist at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and worked at the University of Oxford. She became interested and involved in military when she took on a role with the UK's Ministry of Defence. Nicola is going to share with us a little bit about how what we're doing here in Canada fits with what's happening worldwide. And just a quick note for those of you who are also following on Twitter, there are a number of hashtags that are being used at military families and at family militaire, at military, at veterans, and hashtag veteran family research. Nicola, over to you.
Thank you, Nora, for that lovely introduction. Well, thank you for inviting me to be part of this session on families. I'm really excited to be with you today and have the opportunity to talk about some of the work that I've been involved in from the UK perspective, looking at military families. So the military is an organisation that has been around for a long, long time, and the concept of family is not new. And we only need to look back through the historical archives to see pictures of military personnel and their families. Normally, a male service member with his wife and children. So it's interesting that actually the knowledge about military families from a research perspective has been in the past pretty limited. When I joined King's back, well now 16 years ago, there was no research at that time that was being led by King's looking at the health and well-being of UK military families. Now, this just wasn't within King's, this was across the UK, but also internationally. Much of the focus had been on military personnel themselves and veterans, looking at the consequences of being involved in conflict and combat, and their experiences and how that impacted on their longer term well-being. But we knew very little about how that impacted on their families and their loved ones. Much has changed since then, and I'm pleased to say that there has been a huge increase in the amount of work that's been going on to understand military families in more detail and their experiences and the impact on their health and well-being. So what have we been up to within King's? Now, I'm not going to talk about all of these studies today. I think that would be take us sort of well into the rest of the day, the evening, and probably the next couple of days. But really, I wanted to draw your attention to the number of studies that we have conducted in this field. Many of them are large multi-method studies, and we've followed families up over time. So we can see how individuals' needs change, well, their needs and their experiences have changed over time. A number of these studies are complete and a number are ongoing. And what I really want to do for the sort of rest of my talk is to draw out some of the sort of the key points that I think we've learned from these studies and move us forward in the family space. So what have we learned so far? And this isn't just from our own research within King's, but also from research of our colleagues, also within the UK, but also internationally. I think we've come to understand the importance of including all family members in research. Families don't exist, or family members don't exist in isolation, and what's happening to one individual often impacts on other members of that family. We need to follow families up over time. Things change. The composition of families change, but also their experiences. And we also need to bear in mind that being part of a military family isn't all negative. Okay, so picking up on each of those points. First of all, why is it important that we get different perspectives? So this is some data here where we've asked service personnel and spouses and partners what they perceive the impact of either their own or their loved one's military career has been on their relationship, and if they've got children, on their children. And you can see here's the data for each of those domains that we asked about, split by service person and spouse and partner. If we only collected data from one member of that family, we'd get a slightly different picture than we do when we ask both members of that family. And I think this highlights the importance of asking different family members the same questions. We can build up a much better picture of what's going on in those families, so we get that understanding to be able to develop the most appropriate interventions to help them. As we all know, families members don't exist in isolation, and what impacts one family member is likely to impact other members in that family. So for example, if something's going well for someone, that's likely to rub off and be a positive experience for other family members. But equally, when something's not going so well, that is also likely to impact on other members of that family. Our research has shown that 30% of military families aren't functioning well. What do we mean by that? Well, these families are not doing things together, they're not communicating, they're not sharing experiences, emotions, feelings, etc. And we also found that when families weren't functioning well, those families were more likely to include family members with mental health problems, and those fathers were likely to display high expressed emotion. What do we mean by high expressed emotion? That's when fathers are displaying intolerant or critical emotions towards members of their family. And I think this is important for researchers. As researchers, we often look at one individual, but I think this research has shown that we need to look at multiple individuals within that family. And important for interventions, Often interventions are delivered to an individual, whereas I think we need to be considering family-focused interventions. Things change over time. We know that the composition of families change. We also know that people's experiences change, and that can impact on their mental health and well-being. And I'm illustrating that example here with data that we've collected on children, where we asked, these are the same children that we collected data on at 2 time points, approximately 5 years apart. And you can see that between those 2 time points, things have changed. We can see that a proportion of children who didn't have a disorder at time 1 now have a disorder at time 2, and a proportion of children who did have a disorder, when we saw them at time 1, no longer have that disorder at time 2. So we need to be constantly revisiting these families, because the evidence that we collected maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago may longer be relevant in the current circumstances. So it's important to continually follow these families up so we can ensure that the interventions and support that's being provided is appropriate at that time. And it's not all bad. As researchers, we're very good at focusing on the negatives. We're very good at talking about the risk factors, what's going to make you unwell. And we really need to think about the other side, about the positives of being part of a military family. Not all military families are damaged, suffering, struggling, which are statements that we often see, at least in the British media. The quotes that you see on this slide are from adolescents who are part of military families who took part in one of our studies. And, I've just pulled out some for the purposes of today, but these children were proud of what their father did or does. He fights for Queen and country, he protects people. They also talked about the opportunities that were afforded to them because of their father's military service. And they talked about the opportunities for travel within the UK, but also internationally, to visit new places, make new friends, meet new people, etc. And I think, that is really important to show people that it's not all bad and that there are positive aspects of being part of a military family. So what's emerging? What topics are emerging from our research? Perinatal mental health of spouses and partners of military personnel. COVID-19, I don't think we can escape that in the current pandemic. And children, the education of children from service families, their educational attainment, and how we support them through their educational pathways. And I'm just going to touch on each of these to talk about some of the work that we're involved in on each of these emerging topics. So the first one to talk about is perinatal mental health. And this is looking at spouses and partners of military personnel who are pregnant and then during the postnatal period. And we're also collecting equivalent data from the partners of individuals whose partner is not in the UK Armed Forces. So we can compare and contrast between these two groups of women. The reason that we're conducting this work is that based on US literature, there's been concerns about the mental health of women who are in a relationship with someone in the military, and that mental health particularly during the period of pregnancy and postnatally. So we're recruiting women to take part in an online survey, and they're followed up at multiple time points during their pregnancy and the postnatal period. And they're also taking part in some interviews. And this is work that's being conducted by a PhD student with us at King's. Now, this work is ongoing, so please treat these data with caution. They are subject to change. So far to date, we're seeing that overall, the prevalence of depression is equivalent between these two groups of women. So our women of civilian partners and women with military partners. However, there is a slight indication that the rates of severe depression may be higher in our military partners than civilian partners. So something for us to keep under review as the study progresses. As part of the interviews, we've asked these women about coping and help seeking during their pregnancy and postnatally. And I would say to date, the interviews, the women are kind of split into two camps. There's a group of women who, very just getting on with it. I love this statement or this quote, I put my big girl's pants on. They're just cracking on. The military makes you, being part of the military makes you independent. And then there's the other half of the women that we've interviewed so far that are seeking help, but they're not always getting the help and support that they feel that they need. As part of the study, they are given some signposting, and the feedback that we've had is that they've enjoyed having the opportunity to talk to someone about their pregnancy and the postnatal period. Now, the data that we've collected so far has been during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are new expectant and new mums. And, already they're facing a challenging time with a new baby, but they're also facing this during the current coronavirus restrictions. And a lot of these women talk about being lonely and isolated. So I think it's really important that we follow these women up over time, which we will be doing, to ensure that, that they are getting the support and help that they need during this period. Carrying on with COVID-19, we've completed a survey of veterans, UK-based veterans, and we've asked them a whole range of questions about their experiences of COVID and the impact that has had on their mental health and well-being. I just pulled out a couple of findings to share with you today. We found that 3/4 of our veterans have children, and just over half of those with children are under the age of 18. And just under half have had to change their childcare arrangements because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And those that reported having to change their childcare arrangements had higher rates of common mental disorders. And I think the key thing that kind of jumped out at me was that amongst these veterans, those that had children under the 18 years of age, they were more likely to report feelings of loneliness and isolation. And I think, we'd all think if you'd got children in the house, that would make you feel connected and not lonely and isolated. So again, I think it's important that we look at these veterans' families who are coping or dealing with the current pandemic and how that's impacting their family functioning and the well-being, not only their well-being, but the well-being of their families. So, final topic to touch on is education. This statement or quote on the slide, I went to 6 different schools, 2 different colleges, and so far only 1 university from Steffi, is something that we hear a lot when we talk to military children. They talk about, repeating the same curriculum as they change schools due to their parents' relocation as part of military service. Colleagues at the University of Winchester have established SCIP, which is the Service Children's Progression Alliance. And this is a group or an initiative to ensure that the educational potential of service children is met. There are concerns that service children are not making that transition from secondary school into higher education. Now, in order to achieve this, and our colleagues at the University of Winchester have set up what they call SCIP hubs. In the UK, education provision is provided locally, and it varies, and that provision varies across the country. So what The skip hubs are locally based. The idea is to understand what's going on in that local area, in schools, but also in higher educational establishments, to share best practice and to ensure that transition of children from military families from secondary education into higher education. There's a hub in London, and that hub is co-led by us at King's College London and colleagues at the Royal British Legion. And we're working there with our local community to understand what's going on in schools and that transition from those local schools into our London-based universities. So, what have we learned so far? I think, military families face a range of challenges. We shouldn't just look at the negatives, and we need to focus on the family as a unit rather than a collection of individuals. But I think the final point on this slide to bear in mind is that not all families are the same. And despite all this great work that's ongoing, there is a tendency to focus on the traditional family. What do I mean by that? Well, some colleagues at King's and other colleagues from CIMVHR did a review of the military families research and showed that most of the research comes from the US. Most of the research is on married parents with at least one child. And it's often the father who's in the military, normally the army, and with a civilian stay-at-home female wife. And you'll see that there's lots of other groups where there is less research, and for some, there's hardly any research on. And, we need to be better at including the diversity of families in our research, not only to ensure that we understand the needs of these families, but also that appropriate interventions can be in place to help and support them. So what next? Well, to recognise that diversity that we've talked about in the research, and that will help ensure that appropriate services and interventions are put in place. We do need to make sure we follow families up. Families aren't static, they change, and we need to understand those changes that occur over time. And there are also other groups that are currently missing from the literature. So, for example, military mothers and families of physically injured personnel. So there's a great amount of work out there that's ongoing, but there is still more that we could and should do. All of the work that I've talked about today isn't done in isolation. We work with a number of collaborators across the UK, but also internationally. And I'd like to recognise them for their support and collaboration, past, present, and hopefully future. And then finally, I'd like to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules today to join us for this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola. As you can see, what is happening here in Canada is being influenced and being impacted by what's happening worldwide. We're about to move into our panel conversation with the three presenters that you've just had this morning, but we're also interested in your well-being and your health. So we're just going to give you a 5-minute quick stretch break. Give your eyes a little bit of a rest, give the panel a chance to get itself settled and cameras on, and we will reconvene in about 5 minutes. So go give yourself a good stretch, a glass of water, some hydration, and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce this next segment of our symposium today, affectionately referred to as Panel 1. Panel 1, we're going to be sharing a little bit more detail about the research. We're going to be focusing on knowledge mobilization. So what does it mean to take all of this research and get it to the ground? So we have with us our three presenters, Dr. Norris, Dr. Fear, and Linda Manser, who you've just heard presentations from. We also have two additional folks joining us on this panel. We have Shelley Hopkins, and Shelley is the Executive Director of the Halifax and Region Military Family Resource Center. She's been supporting families for more than 25 years, and she is committed to quality service and learning from military family feedback experiences and incorporating military family research to shape the future direction of services. She's embodying the evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence that Linda was talking about earlier. Also like to welcome Tamara Klimschmidt. She's currently the supporting military families as the Executive Director of the Trenton Military Family Resource Center. She's also one of those pioneers in moving from programming with best intentions to programming that's evidence-based. And she combines her focus on impact, combines research and innovation. She has a compassion in order to connect families with services that they need. And I have seen this in action. Welcome, panelists. I have some questions from the participants, as well as some questions I would like to engage you in conversation around. First, one of the questions is, where is this research and what's going to come next? And this particular recording will be available on the CIMVHR YouTube channel. And there will be a variety of materials available on the CIMVHR site with some of this research. And if you're looking for any kind of research on military families, that's your first go-to. So I want to begin by asking the three presenters if there's anything that, having heard each other now, what are some of the biggest insights that you've had from learning from each other? I'm going to start with Dr. Norris. Deb, tell us about sort of what, from your experience, what you've learned from other researchers and what some of your biggest insights are.
Biggest insights. I think I would begin with the recognition that was echoed in the presentations of my colleagues, that military and veteran families are not needy, dependent, not to suggest that there are not issues and concerns that are very relevant and I guess to which we are responsible by way of responding through program and policy development as well as research. But over the course of my career, and having of late the wonderful opportunity to work with great colleagues, two of whom you've also heard from this morning, as well as many others, that these families are diverse, they are complex, they're not needy and dependent, but interdependent. So the interdependent nature of their families has been a revelation, or I guess a reinforcement for me. Also about resiliency and resilience. We've talked about that a few times as well already this morning. But also what was reinforced for me is that resiliency is not an outcome necessarily. It is not a trait or an ability, but arises from the synergy, again, the interdependence between what capacities the family has or doesn't have at a particular point in time, and their access to resources and supports external to their family systems. So two big revelations.
Great, thank you for that. And I'm going to come back to resilience in just a minute, but I want to ask Nicola a question about, you mentioned in your presentation that it was important to get the family perspective, and that just one person's perspective isn't necessarily enough to give you a true understanding. And this is true with other research. And I'm thinking about research all around the world where couples are asked who's sharing the most of the housework. And often he's saying, oh, 100% shared. And she's saying, absolutely not, never, ever, not even close. And so those perspectives are interesting. How are you taking that concept and integrating it into your research and making sure that you have these multiple perspectives?
Thanks, Nora. It's a challenge, I think, is the first thing to say. And I would kind of say that when we first started to do the research, we were very much focused on the service person or the veteran, and we asked about their experiences of family life. And it was kind of, like the penny dropped. We need to look at this from the other side as well. How are the family experiencing this? And are they reflecting the same experiences and challenges, or are they seeing other challenges, opportunities, etc.? So we have broadened out, as I spoke about earlier, to include spouses, partners. We try and follow up families even when they're no longer together to understand maybe what has gone wrong. And I think the additional piece of the picture now that we're drawing on is the voice of the child and the young person in that family. And they see things from a different angle again. So as a researcher, it's messy. And I think, as a researcher, we like things to be in a nice little box, and we know that's how it fits together, but actually that's not real life. We live in the real world, and families are messy, families are complicated. So we do try our best. We try our hardest to get all family members to participate in our research, but obviously it's voluntary, it's up to them. But we try and encourage them, talk about the value that us being able to hear their voice and their experiences will help, hopefully them, but also the wider community.
Thank you. And I think that's happening worldwide, where it used to be thought that the family well-being was the sum of the parts of the individual well-being. And what your research and what Linda's research has shown is that that's not necessarily true. Linda, people are asking about your research and where they might be able to access your research. Can you just let us know if that information is public or where they might be able to get that information?
For sure. One of the articles is in the, actually a couple are in the Journal of Military and Veteran Family Health. And that's all publicly accessible, easy to find. I don't know the website off the top of my head, but I'm sure it will be sent out. And we also have more specific internal research that is now posted on capconnection.ca as well. Great,
thank you. Linda, you talked a lot about sort of the messiness of families, as Nicola mentioned, but you also talked about it as a moving target. And I think all the presentations today talked about how complex families are, because from one day to the next, they change, they evolve. And one of the things we say at the Vanier Institute is that families are the most adaptable institution in our societies and constantly changing. They also have a 200-year present. And so past family experiences, current and moving forward, also have an impact on family well-being. In the work that you've been doing, have there been any findings around or studies related to the complexity of these families, and in particular the experiences of female overrepresentation as single parents in CAF, and what about the female members that have a male civilian partner? Can you just give us a couple of quick highlights on that?
Highlights in terms of research done, very little, frankly, at this point. I think, and Nicola definitely talked about this as well, our lens right now, our research lens right now is almost solely through the eyes of the female civilian spouse. So it's a one-sided perspective. There is a fair amount of research in the CAF on gender issues, gender equity, that will start to fall out, I think, into the family realm. So we're starting to understand the female serving member's perspective better. Do we understand anything from the male civilian spouse perspective? Very little. Do we understand anything from the child perspective? Only a couple studies on that as well. But it's massive, because I mean, we know that in the civilian population, gender roles, gender equity is still an issue, right? So of course it's going to be an issue in the military that has a whole different structure and culture around it as well. We don't know what the disconnects are between civilian and military cultures that way. So yeah, hot topic, definitely.
Great, thank you. Shelley, taking it to the ground, have you had any different experiences trying to support military families if there is a family history in the military, or if that spouse or partner comes from a military family? Are you noticing any difference in the field as people either seek help or don't, because of the sort of traditional ideas of this self-reliance, independence, as the presentations showed, the whole shake it up, or suck it up, shake it off, move on, don't let it bother you, you can get through this kind of underlying culture? Are you seeing that on the ground?
Well, one of the things that we often hear for so many years was military families know what they signed up for. And what we say now is that's absolutely not true. You have no idea what you sign up for. When you start to, date a military member, and then you move on and you have a family, and then next thing you know, you're being relocated, or you have to give up your job. Families didn't necessarily understood what it meant. So I do think that there's definitely a shift in the traditional. If you grew up in a military family, you had some sense of what that was, in terms of the expectations around relocation, and what it meant to have a partner who come in and join in that journey with you. But for the new members, and we're seeing a lot of people join later in life, with blended families, so you've got cross-jurisdictional co-parenting relationships. So yeah, it's very different. I think the new journey for the new member and the family that maybe had the ability to grow up in a military family and have a little bit, I think those two experiences are quite different, which is why it needs a family-centered approach. Every family is unique. Every family is different. Thank you.
Linda, in the research that you've been doing with CAF, has there been any focus? You described the journey, the life cycle, the life course that families go through, the journey that they go through. Have you had a chance to look at the modern military experience versus the historic military experience? And is there any similar difference? And maybe Nicola, I'll ask you the same thing in a second. Linda?
Yeah, that's an interesting question for sure. We haven't done a comparison, but we know it's changing. And I think where I can provide some context is if we look at what we were researching a decade ago or 2 decades ago, we were looking at how do we support families through the challenges. So how is the child being impacted mental health wise or behavioral wise? Why is there chronic unemployment among military spouses? There was this pervasive notion that military families were falling apart because of the military. And I think we looked a decade ago, 2 decades ago at that symptom, because we thought the cause was the military challenges. And we thought the military challenges are absolute, unchanging. It's a cause that we can't fix, right? It's not curable. So we looked at the symptoms instead. Now, I think we're seeing quite a bit of a shift. We're actually asking those questions that like, if the family is experiencing distress, is it because of the military challenge, or would they be experiencing that distress regardless of what military career or what career they were in? So we have to question the cause of the distress first, and we also have to ask the question about is the military challenge actually unchanging, or can we actually change those challenges? So for instance, relocations, postings, we know how many are posting frequently. Is that actually an operational requirement, or is it happening because of career progression? And if it's happening because of career progression, then that's actually a conversation that's in the realm of the family to have, right? So they can actually have a conversation about, is it your turn to have your career move forward right now, or is it my turn? Is it worth the risk of our child having their education disrupted, or do we put your career on hold for another year or 2 years while we get through this phase? So there's some assumptions that we have about the military challenges, that they're unchanging, they're absolutely standard and can't be flexible that we know absolutely are actually flexible. And the military is looking at this very closely too. So a lot of these things we need to really stop researching the symptoms and start researching the causes.
Right. So Tamara, in your experience on the ground, we've heard from the presentations, each one has mentioned the sort of shift from looking at or classifying military families as damaged, struggling, suffering, to and needy, vulnerable, and at risk, to proud, courageous, strong, and resilient. As we take this evidence to the field and as we start talking about pride and courage and strength, it makes me think back on some of the work that Dr. Heidi Kram has been doing, in that everybody's strong, resilient, and courageous until they're not. And you're on the front line, you're seeing that, witnessing it, experiencing it at any given time. How are you taking all of this research and applying it in your programs?
Well, it's really interesting. It gives us a basis to work from, and coordinating that with the actual conversations that we're having with families makes that research really a strength to build upon. The minute we start listening to families, we understand their unique challenges at this moment. And having a good group of people who've experienced a lot of these challenges firsthand, you really do begin to say, yes, I'm a strong military family member, but this move was harder because, or my family circumstances were more challenging because, and the research that's being done right now is giving us a little bit of a window into why those specific challenges may be more monumental to families at certain periods of time, for sure.
Nicola, you mentioned your study on COVID-19 and the impacts on military veteran families. With the military experience, with absences, with isolation, with separation, with all of those things that Linda and Deb described in their presentations, is there any protective factors or experience that military families and veteran families are bringing to the COVID experience that's helping them manage? Is there anything that we can take from that experience to help non-military families manage in COVID?
Yeah, so what we have found is that within our military or veteran community that we've studied, so these are more recent veterans, so these were individuals and their families who were in service during the recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, so we can talk particularly about those as opposed to much older or much younger veterans. And what we see is that from a mental health perspective, the rates of mental health are very similar to what they were pre-pandemic as to during the pandemic, which, at least from a UK perspective, is not what we're seeing within the general population. So we do think that maybe there are some of those skills that, you've kind of been trained as a military family to deal with adversity and unusual situations. So yes, we do. We are, well, we think, based on the data that we're seeing, seeing some of that. Yes, we've done an article actually that was published in the CIMVHR journal where we were able to look at the experiences of military families during deployment and sort of translate those into how military families deal with those challenges that are kind of thrown at them during deployment, how that could be translated into help and support for the families of frontline workers during the COVID pandemic. And I'm sure we can share the link to that article with the audience afterwards. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I asked each of the panelists prior to today was to share a little bit about their journey in studying and supporting and working with military and veteran families. And I asked them if they were military connected and what would their families, how would their families or friends or colleagues describe them in one word? And Deb, although you haven't been directly part of a military family, you did experience a lot of movement being a child in a banker family in the day. And you were referred to as a bank brat, and you found camaraderie as a child with Navy brats and Air Force brats. Your family and friends describe you as very committed. How does being committed serve you, and this experience as being a bank brat serve you in the work that you're doing?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I think it links into part of the story that I told about emerging from the wilderness that was kickstarted our symposium today. I saw my mother as a bank wife in the 60s and 70s, being able to pivot. That's a word we're using these days, but she was the original pivoter, as were her contemporaries. We'd be told we're on a Wednesday that we're moving, my father would be transferred on Monday, and we had to pull up stakes and move on. So as a child is able to understand this, of course, is very limited, but I could see the work involved, the daily work that was just taken for granted and not understood to be as integral to the bank mission as at some level I probably realized it did. So fast forward to that knocking on the door of Shelley's Military Family Resource Center before she was there. I overheard a comment at a coffee break in one of those first programs I was facilitating, where the military partner was saying, here we go. We got to work them in and work them out and work them in, which actually became the title of my doctoral dissertation, which I was doing at the same time in the 90s. Because I was fascinated by what that work was, what's involved. And it took me back to my mom's story of working, the family system through that process of pulling up stakes and going on to a new community. So
great. Thank you. Thank you. Shelley, you're known for being action-oriented. In a sentence or two, how is that helping you apply the research in your programming?
Oh, many ways. We actually have a position in our center. You're going to hear from Kara on the next panel, Director of Learning and Evaluation. So research and family feedback is a constant conversation in our MFRC. And we're always talking about, I've also had the opportunity to attend CIMVHR. So we're always talking about the research, and I have lots of conversations with Linda about how we translate the research into practice. So right now, it's really for us, it's all about modernization, making sure families know that the MFRC of today is not the way that it was 10 years ago, and that we are a family-centered approach, and we're using research to inform, we're using their feedback to inform, and translating that research into practice, and also finding opportunities to get the practice into the and the knowledge that we have into the hands of researchers.
Great, thank you. Tamara, in a sentence or two, how does being fearless and impulsive help you transfer knowledge to practice?
Oh, my staff are all just shivering right now. No, what it means is that when we're listening to families, that rather than sit and listen to what we can't do or what the systems don't allow us to do, is to jump in and say, okay, let's find a path that can make this possible. And the best example I have is the recent submission of a proposal for a nurse practitioner clinic. It's a scary road to go down, and it changes the way we think about what we do and how we do it. But this is what families and research is telling us is a priority for families. So that's the fearless part. And I'm lucky enough to have a board of directors that is fearless alongside me. So, so far, so good.
Thank you. I'm just going to do one rapid circle around the panel. Linda, you too, like Deb Norris, are identified as committed. How would you complete the phrase, wouldn't it be great if?
That's too hard. I would say that I would hope that we can create an environment of openness and honesty so that we can actually learn from each other. I think that we're really good in our silos. Working across boards will help us rapidly respond to the changes quickly.
Great, thank you. Nicola, you're impatient, you're stubborn, you're loyal. Wouldn't it be great if?
Or just building on Linda's point, wouldn't it be great if we could learn from each other all together, face to face, and not do this in 2D? That would mean I'd have to wear shoes, not slippers, but you know, I'd make that sacrifice for us all to be together. So thank you.
Deb, how about you? Wouldn't it be great if?
Wouldn't it be great if we could continue to grow the field through training new scholars and practitioners and also enhancing military family literacy in the broader communities?
Thank you. Shelley, wouldn't it be great if?
If we could get more families to participate in the research that's going to inform the practice that's ultimately going to benefit families.
Absolutely. And there are a number of studies currently underway. And if you know of any families who are interested in participating in research, particularly adolescents and their education, please, there are lots of researchers that want to connect with you. Tamara, last word for you. Wouldn't it be great if?
I've been saying this for a number of years and I'm not going to stop saying it, but wouldn't it be great if we had a consistent way to speak and have conversations directly with families rather than have to work around to contact them? Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your input on this panel. Your insights are always welcome. Thank you for those who are providing evidence for evidence-based practice, and for those of you who are contributing your practice-based evidence to the conversations. Thank you all so very much. We're going to be moving on to panel number 2. Now, while we shift over the cameras, let me just share with you a little bit about what panel 2 is all about. Panel 2 is going to pick up from panel 1. This is really about knowledge activation. How do we take all of that wealth and knowledge and experience and really activate it, really make change, really have impact on the lives of military veteran families and on their individual and family well-being? It is my pleasure to introduce this panel. First, we have Cindy Mills. Many of you know Cindy, and if you don't know her, to look at her, you know her from her lifestyle magazine. Excuse me. She is an award-winning writer. She is a military spouse. She's moved all over, and she is one of the most prolific writers and supporters of military families in Canada. We have Nathan Svensson. Nathan is the research director at Veterans Affairs Canada. Nathan's well known for his work around the well-being surveillance framework in the research world. And he's also known at CRA, one of our favorite departments of the federal government to poke fun at, where he was working on the development of family matching methodology. So really interesting there. Nathan does have a history in as being part of a military connected family and was born overseas to a Canadian veteran on deployment at NATO. So always interesting there. Kara was mentioned earlier on the earlier panel. She's the Director of Evaluation and Learning at Halifax and Region Military Family Resource Center. And she uses a strength-based family-centered approach, one that has proven to be very effective across the globe. And last but not least, we have Major Nathalie Auger. She is currently involved in the, I'm going to get you the first major acronym of the day, DPS3 Team Lead, Military Family Initiatives at DGMP, STRAT, Military Personnel Command, Canadian Armed Forces, Government of Canada. She is part of a military family and is going to bring a range of insights to our conversation today. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about knowledge activation and how we take this information. And we're going to frame this around, wouldn't it be great if? We're going to start with that with this group. I'm going to start, Nathan, with you. You've heard all about the complexity of research. You experience it yourself with veteran families. It's a moving target. It's complex. It's diverse in structures, diverse in experiences.
how would you complete the phrase, wouldn't it be great if?
Well, I would say, I'll give a global statement. So wouldn't it be great if Veterans Affairs and veterans themselves could really fully understand all the ways that family members support a veteran's well-being and vice versa, the impacts of the veteran's well-being on the family members.
And just to take that a little bit further, one of the participants is asking, as we have this research coming out, how is this being translated into funding decisions? How is your work and your research impacting funding decisions and priority setting at Veterans Affairs Canada?
Yeah, I think over the past couple of years, National Defence and Veterans Affairs have partnered, I would say, as closely as they ever have, to really rework the transition experience for members who are leaving the military and their families, to catch those people who are falling through the cracks. And it's the falling through the cracks part that relies on the research. So it's the studies about the experiences of families, qualitative and quantitative, that are helping us to identify whose needs are not being met and who's underrepresented and whose voices aren't being heard. And so they've set up in recent years the Seamless Transition Task Force. So they call it the Closing the Seam Initiative, so that people aren't falling off the cliff when they leave the armed forces, and that their support networks disappear or dissipate, and there's nothing left to catch them. So that whole process is an example of research-informed, evidence-informed policy decisions. Great,
thank you. As we go through this panel and asking each of them to respond to the wouldn't it be great if question, we're forecasting forward, we're looking at inspiration and aspirations going forward. I'm going to invite each of the participants to put in the chat, how would you complete the phrase, wouldn't it be great if? Kara, you're on the ground. You're delivering these services, you're evaluating, you're strength-based and family-focused. How would you respond to wouldn't it be great if? You're on mute, Kara.
I think I even changed.
You have to put $1 in the pot. We've been saying at the Institute that every time somebody said mute, I'm on mute, or you're on mute, you have to put $1 in the pot, and then that way nobody will ever have to fundraise again. MFRCs will have all the money they need. So
it's awesome. I get so excited listening that I forget my role. So I think it even changed listening a little bit, or morphed when I was listening to Linda. So wouldn't it be great if we were all collectively research ready? So I guess that's the part I get excited about. There have been many moments of brilliance, but it's putting those together for consistency. And how do we collaborate? So how do we collaborate on the ground? How do we use that research? How do we have that communication back and forth to really inform the practice of what's working and be able to evaluate to see if it's doing what we thought it would do? So, and really working with families. So as Shelley said, really wanting families to be involved in this and understanding they want the information. So how do we get that to them as well? So what if we were collectively research ready?
Great, thank you. Major Auger, tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing, and how do you think we can get more military families involved in research and engaged in the process of data collection? And how would you complete the phrase, wouldn't it be great if?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'll echo what some of the other speakers were saying, that is a critical need, is to get the military families involved in that research, because they know what they need. So I'd start off by, I'm very idealistic. And so when completing that phrase, wouldn't it be great if, for me, thinking a bit back again, I was a base brat. And the idealism of what it meant to me back then is that wouldn't it be great if military families actually felt like part of the military family? And I think that's a bit of the disconnect, is that we put that title on them, but clearly they don't feel like we are supporting them. And so that would be my hope. Wouldn't it be great? So to go back to your initial question, part of what our team is doing is that it takes all that great research that Linda talked about earlier with regards to that comprehensive military family plan, all that great research, we take it and we're trying to incorporate it into a military family strategy, which focuses broadly on kind of two lines of attack, for lack of a better word. One is what can we affect under the authorities of CAF in the military? And we've named that CFB, Canadian Forces Base Canada, to look at kind of a seamless overall structure within Canada. And that speaks, of course, to a bit of the standardization of you should expect all the same services in different locations. The other line that we've named Seamless Canada, which goes to a bit of the other initiative that Nathan spoke about. And those are all the things that we can influence through our provincial and our territorial partners, because they're outside of defense and CAF authorities. So that's where we push, as I said, some of the research to our provincial territorial representatives and partners, and we say, listen, this is the data, these are our needs. How can we work together to alleviate some of these challenges that research has brought up?
Great, thank you. A little bit like what Kara was talking about being research ready and bringing all the players together, the knowledge, the people with the knowledge, researchers with the mobilizers, and with you folks, the activators. Cindy, how about you? How would you respond to Wouldn't It Be Great If, and how would your readers respond to Wouldn't It Be Great If?
Oh, I'm with readers. Let me think. I like what the Major said regarding families being part of. I wonder if that seems to be what the issue is we, I've been part of the military community for almost 30 years. And back in the day when we didn't have MFRCs, and not that I'm saying we don't need them, because that's not what I'm saying, is there was a greater sense of camaraderie. We as family lived on bases. Very few people lived off the base, and we'd gather at our porches and we would talk. And I think as the military has evolved from all of these little bases to these super bases, and where we have 6,000 people living in Petawawa, the community that is kind of fallen apart, and especially during COVID, like we don't have that connection anymore, or rarely have that connection. And I don't know whose responsibility that is. Like, is it the families, or is it, I don't know if it's the militaries, I don't know if it's the MFRCs, but we have just fallen into the communities. And I think we do as much as we can, and then, like Heidi has said, you're good until it all falls apart, and then it just goes astray, and you have to start picking up the pieces as the family, and you don't know where to turn to. And I think that so wouldn't it be great if we had a sense of camaraderie again, if we had that connection of that I think we don't realize we're longing for. I don't think people realize they're missing that, because for some of the newer military folks, they've never really had that connection.
Great, thank you. Your family and friends described you as inquisitive and effervescent, and you bring that energy to this conversation, and I want to thank you for that and all the work that you do with the magazine. Major Auger, just a last word from you. I'm going to do once round last words, and then we're going to start to wrap up. Your word from your colleagues and family and friends was conscientious. How is being conscientious helping you find ways to realize that vision of making it possible for folks to access the services that they need?
Well, I'll start off by saying it probably drives my coworkers and my supervisors bananas. But what it means is that I continuously look for second and third order effects. And so, because the last thing we want to do is set up a policy that at face value helps, but second or third order effect actually aggravates another challenge on a side manner. So I continuously kind of open a door, turn over a rock, then see a couple of things scatter, and then open another door, turn over another rock. So I would say, that quality helps, hopefully, in making sure that the policies and the strategies have longevity.
Great, thank you. Kara, you're curious and reflective. How is that helping you realize your vision of wouldn't it be great if being research ready?
Asking the questions of my colleagues, constantly being in those conversations and looking for more information, and curious to be able to do that. So I think that's really what helps to be able to, we know what we know now. Lots of people have spoken to that. It's the picture right now, but how do we continue to be curious and modernize with what the real military family is looking like in the moment?
Nathan, you've been described as being reflective. How is that helping you realize your vision of wouldn't it be great if?
Well, I'm going to echo what Natalie said in looking at second order, third order effects, because I think that's really the consideration that's important. Often from within a department, there can be a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of push on a hot topic of the day to take a policy step this way or that way. And looking down the road is really, it might sound like a really good solution for now, but down the road, there might be some people who are negatively impacted, whose voices we have not had a chance to hear yet. And I think that's where we should be pushing the research. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say what benefits we will experience following the national census that's going to take place in May in being able to understand the demographic breakdown of veterans and their families, and be able to understand and see whose voices we're not hearing in that process. So not only will every living veteran in Canada be able to identify themselves on the short-form census in May, but also every individual in their household will be able to report their relationship to that veteran. So we will have a new picture about the structure and makeup of Canadian veteran families and military families, because it's also serving military members. We'll have a better picture than we ever have before. So this, I would say, throws open the doors for researchers in years to come to look at how families live together, and in conjunction with other questions on the long-form census, the structure of family-level estimates of Indigenous veterans, Black and racialized veterans, veterans with disabilities, all of those groups. I think this is a pivotal moment for us.
Some of the participants have been asking about some of those questions about how can we disaggregate some of the data, and we haven't been able to do that up to this point. And we've already started to talk about Census 2021 happening this June for the first time in history. In Canada, there will be a veteran identifier on the survey, on the census, critically important this year and going forward. And we'll start to see that data start to roll out in spring of 2022. So we've just begun to understand military veteran families, but open the floodgates. And being research ready, Kara, this will help to provide us with a lot of foundational work that will allow the researchers to go forward. Kara, I'm going to give you last word, and then I'm going to go back to Cindy, and then I'm going to close off. So, Kara, how about you? Curious, reflective. What are you hoping for going forward?
I am very excited about getting research ready. I think this is, we've spent that time looking at the videos of where we've been and now where are we going. And this is the exciting part for me, is really prioritizing this. We have Canadian research. We're going to have more, and the connections between the field, between families and researchers and policymakers, and strengthening that. I think that's really, it's exciting. And over 20 years of working with military families to be at this place now.
Awesome, thank you. Cindy, how about you? Cindy, you're on mute. You have to put $1 in the jar.
I was on mute because I didn't want the phone to ring and you guys hear it. So moving forward with the research and what to look forward to, I think that's exciting that it's going to be on the census, and we're going to get a sense of how many veterans there are out there that we don't necessarily hear from. I think there are, as we know, all of us, it's no secret, there are a lot of military families who, are doing fine day to day, and just how many of us are there out there, and also, what is our population when it comes to being in part of our military community?
Great, thank you. Major Auger, last word for you. What are you hoping to see in the short term and the long term with all this new data coming out of census?
I'd say one word, just awareness. I think one thing that we did hear from one of our provincial representatives is that the mass population doesn't, we take it for granted, but they aren't aware of the challenges that our military families are experiencing. And I think hopefully if we get a grip on the data of how many people, how many Canadians are actually touched by a veteran and are linked to a veteran, I think that'll help us move mountains.
Great, thank you. We haven't received any wouldn't it be greatest from the participants, but I'm assuming that they're going to be coming in shortly. But what I would like to do is to just take a moment to thank you all for your insights, your curiosity, your reflections, your inquisitiveness, your conscientiousness, your curiosity. So thank you all for bringing your insights to this panel and to giving us this inspiration and aspiration moving forward. We've heard a lot about families and their diversity, their complexity. We've also heard about the significant importance of military veteran family research, how impactful it can be for both service providers, but in particular for family members and extended family members. We've seen that there is huge strength and power in partnerships and collaborations between researchers and service providers. We've heard a lot about how research can be applied on the ground and how important that is to blend evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence going forward with policies and programs. And we've learned how significant CIMVHR is in sort of consolidating and bringing all of this together. So I'm going to officially close my role on this at the symposium and pass the mic over to Heidi Cram, who is going to provide some closing remarks and tie everything up in a tidy little bow as only Heidi can. So thank you so very much for your attention, and thanks to all the panelists.
Thanks so much, Nora. You know, it's been really an incredible morning to hear about how far we've come and all of the things that now become possible. Thanks to everyone in the chat for all your great questions, because I think that we are at a point now where we can begin to actually look at all these things that we can now ask that we couldn't before the work that's been described today. So the event really has been, a point of inflection for us, allowing us to reflect on how far we've come and really to get excited about what is now possible going forward. If we were at CIMVHR's forum and we had our face-to-face, we would all be totally jacked right now. And we would have the hallway conversations that we couldn't stop, and the event would be closed down around us and we would still be talking. So let's continue the conversation, and we look forward to continuing them virtually. Reach out to us through email, any follow-up questions or comments you have. Eventually we'll get back to the face-to-face that we all value so much. We thank you for your interest and participation today, and we would love to hear from you about the issues that we talked about the possibilities going forward. And I would like to thank the presenters, the trainees, the panelists, along with Nora, Russ, Dave, and Stephanie, and of course the event staff for making today possible. Thank you very much. Dave.
Thank you, Heidi.
A closing note from Dave. Thanks.
To all our participants, thanks for joining us today. Nora, thank you once again for your leadership in the area of military and veteran family research and for helping us connect the dots today. Before we go, I just want to add that we are grateful to our presenters and panelists for sharing their expertise on this emerging topic that will undeniably continue to grow. Thank you to all and stay safe.